The Deep Space Monitoring Station orbited a dead moon at the edge of known space. For 300 years, it had watched the empty void between galaxies, waiting for something that might never come. Today, something did. Commander Zix-9 felt his scales tingle as the gravity sensors began screaming warnings across the bridge. The Catherian officer had seen many things in his 40 years of service with the Galactic Council Defense Force. He had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of planets. He had fought pirates, rebels, and ancient automated defense systems left behind by dead civilizations. But he had never seen readings like this. "Sir, the gravitational distortion is off our charts," reported his sensor officer, a young Talarian, whose blue skin had turned pale with fear. "Whatever is coming through hyperspace is massive, bigger than anything in our databases." Zix-9 clicked his claws against his command chair. The Galactic Council had been expecting this day for decades. The humans had finally developed faster-than-light travel. First contact protocols had been prepared, translated into dozens of languages, and rehearsed countless times. They had picked this neutral zone specifically because it was far from any inhabited worlds. If something went wrong, at least the damage would be contained. But no one had expected the humans to arrive like this. "Energy signatures are spiking," called out another officer. "Sir, I'm reading power levels that match a Class A stellar reactor. No, wait, multiple stellar reactors. This can't be right." The space in front of them began to twist and bend. Reality seemed to fold in on itself as something enormous forced its way through the barriers between dimensions. The very fabric of space-time groaned under the strain. Warning lights flashed red across every console on the monitoring station. Then it appeared. The human ship materialized in a flash of exotic radiation that temporarily blinded their sensors. When the interference cleared, every being on the bridge stood in stunned silence. Where empty space had existed moments before, a massive construct now hung in the void like a metal mountain. The ship was 12 kilometers long and nearly 3 kilometers wide at its thickest point. Its hull was a dark gray metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapon ports dotted its surface like the scales of some ancient dragon. Massive engines at its rear still glowed with the energy of their journey through hyperspace. Along its sides, strange symbols spelled out words in human writing that their computers were already translating. "Terra's hammer," Zix-9 read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's what they call it." The ship was beautiful in the way that only something truly dangerous could be beautiful. It moved with the slow grace of a predator that knew nothing could threaten it. As it settled into normal space, smaller ships began emerging from bays along its hull. These escorts were each the size of a council frigate, but they moved around the massive vessel like tiny fish around a whale. "Sir, incoming transmission," reported the communications officer. "They're using standard council diplomatic frequencies. How did they know our protocols?" "Put it through," Zix-9 ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the human ship. The first thing that struck Zix-9 was how similar humans looked to several other species in the council. They were bipedal, with forward-facing eyes and opposable thumbs. But there was something different about them. Something in their eyes that spoke of worlds conquered and challenges overcome. A human female sat in the central command chair. She wore a dark blue uniform with silver markings that probably indicated her rank. Her hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her eyes held the confidence of someone accustomed to command. When she smiled, it was warm and genuine. But Zix-9 couldn't shake the feeling that he was looking at a predator trying to be friendly. "Greetings," she said in perfect galactic standard. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Alliance vessel Terra's Hammer. We come in peace, seeking dialogue with the Galactic Council. We apologize for any delay, but we had some navigation difficulties on our first journey to this region of space." Zix-9 found his voice after a moment of shocked silence. "Welcome, Captain Chen. I am Commander Zix-9 of the Galactic Council Defense Force. We were expecting you, but perhaps not quite like this." Captain Chen tilted her head slightly, and Zix-9 realized she was probably studying his appearance just as he was studying hers. "I hope our arrival hasn't caused any inconvenience. We tried to emerge at the coordinates your diplomatic message specified, but hyperspace navigation is still new to us. Are we in the right location for the scheduled first contact meeting?" "You are exactly where you should be," Zix-9 confirmed, though his voice sounded strange even to himself. "Captain, if I may ask, is this a military vessel?" The human smile widened, and Zix-9 noticed that her species had very white teeth, sharp teeth. "Oh no, Commander. Terra's Hammer is a diplomatic cruiser. We thought it would be appropriate to arrive in something that showed proper respect for this historic occasion. We brought some of our cultural exchange materials and gifts for the Council representatives." A diplomatic cruiser. This planet killer was their idea of a diplomatic vessel. Zix-9 felt a chill run through his scales. If this was how humans approached diplomacy, what did their actual warships look like? "That's very thoughtful of you, Captain. The Council delegation should arrive within the next few hours. In the meantime, perhaps you would like to tour our monitoring station? It's much smaller than your ship, but we'd be honored to show you our hospitality." "We would be delighted," Captain Chen replied. "I'll bring a small diplomatic team. Our cultural specialists are very excited to meet representatives of the Galactic Council." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Zix-9 looked around at his crew, seeing his own shock reflected in their faces. The Tellarian sensor officer was the first to speak. "Sir, should we contact Fleet Command? They need to know about this." Zix-9 nodded slowly. "Send a priority message to Admiral Veltar. Tell her the humans have arrived for first contact, and they've brought what appears to be a Dreadnought-class vessel. Request immediate backup." As his communications officer began transmitting the urgent message, Zix-9 continued studying the massive human ship on his screens. Their sensors were finally beginning to penetrate some of its outer hull, and what they found made his blood run cold. The ship's armor was composed of materials that their computers couldn't identify. Some kind of exotic metal alloy that seemed to bend electromagnetic radiation around it. The weapon systems were equally mysterious, but the energy readings suggested they could crack planets. The shields surrounding the vessel were stronger than anything in the Council's arsenal. But perhaps most terrifying of all was what their deep scans revealed about the ship's construction. This wasn't some hastily built prototype or experimental vessel. Every line of its design spoke of mature technology and careful engineering. The humans hadn't just stumbled upon faster-than-light travel, they had mastered it, along with materials, science and energy systems that put Council technology to shame. "Sir," called out his tactical officer, a gruff Bulvarian whose species was known for their military expertise. "I'm analyzing their weapon signatures. These aren't just ship killers. Some of these systems could sterilize continents. Could they threaten our station?" Zix-9 asked, though he already knew the answer. "Sir, they could vaporize our station without even charging their main guns. We wouldn't even register as a target worth their attention." As if to emphasize the point, one of the human escort ships drifted closer to the monitoring station. It was roughly the same size as their largest defensive platform, but the casual way it moved suggested its captain wasn't even slightly concerned about potential threats. The escort's weapon systems were powered down, a gesture that would have seemed friendly if not for the fact that this single ship probably outgunned their entire defensive network. "Commander," his sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting massive manufacturing capability within the main ship. It looks like they have entire industrial complexes built into their hull. They could probably build a fleet while traveling between stars." Zix-9 closed his eyes and tried to process what they had discovered. The humans hadn't just developed space travel. They had developed space-based civilization. Their ships weren't just vessels for traveling between worlds. They were mobile worlds in their own right. A soft chime indicated an incoming message from Fleet Command. Admiral Veltar's image appeared on his personal communications screen. The elderly Xantarian's usual calm demeanor was nowhere to be seen. "Commander Zix-9, I've received your report. Are you certain about these readings?" "Yes, Admiral. The human ship is 12 kilometers long and armed with weapon systems that our computers classify as planet killers. They claim it's a diplomatic vessel." Admiral Veltar was quiet for a long moment. "Commander, I want you to maintain full diplomatic courtesy, but I'm sending every available ship in the sector to your location. If the humans have hostile intentions, we need to be prepared." "Understood, Admiral. But, sir, I should mention that they seem genuinely friendly. Captain Chen appears to be sincere in her desire for peaceful contact." "Let's hope so, Commander. Because if they're not, I'm not sure there's much we can do about it." The transmission ended, leaving Zix-9 alone with his thoughts. Through his viewport, he could see the massive human ship hanging in space like a dark omen. Its weapons remained. Powered down, its shields operating at minimum levels. Every indication suggested the humans were exactly what they claimed to be, peaceful explorers seeking dialogue. But the ship itself told a different story. It spoke of a civilization that had learned to survive in a hostile universe by becoming the most dangerous thing in it. A species that approached diplomacy by arriving in vessels capable of destroying worlds. As he watched, a small shuttle detached from Terra's hammer and began heading toward their station. It was sleek and graceful, probably unarmed, but even it was larger than most Council courier ships. Zix-9 realized that everything about human technology seemed to be built on a massive scale. He thought about the countless species that made up the Galactic Council. Peaceful traders, explorers, and philosophers who had spent millennia building a civilization based on cooperation and mutual understanding. They had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. The humans were coming, aboard his station in a few minutes. Representatives of a species that had developed the technology to travel between stars in ships that could crack worlds. They claimed to come in peace, but they had brought enough firepower to conquer half the galaxy. Zix-9 straightened his uniform and prepared to meet humanity for the first time. He hoped Captain Chen was as peaceful as she appeared. Because if she wasn't, the Galactic Council was about to face its greatest crisis in 3 centuries. The shuttle docked with their station. With mechanical precision, Zix-9 took a deep breath and headed for the airlock. History was about to be made, one way or another. Captain Sarah Chen stepped through the airlock of the monitoring station and immediately noticed how small everything seemed. The corridors were narrow, the ceilings low, and the entire structure felt fragile compared to the reinforced bulk of Terra's hammer. But she reminded herself that not every species built for war the way humans did. These people had created a peaceful civilization among the stars, and that was something to be admired. The alien who greeted her was fascinating. Commander Zix-9 stood about 6 feet tall, with reptilian features and scales that shifted from dark green to bronze in the station's lighting. His eyes were large and intelligent, and when he smiled, it seemed genuine despite his obvious nervousness. "Captain Chen, welcome aboard Monitoring Station Kepler-7. This is a historic moment for both our civilizations." Sarah returned his smile and extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. After a moment's hesitation, Zix-9 reached out and grasped it carefully. His scales felt warm and smooth, not unpleasant at all. "The honor is ours, Commander. Humanity has dreamed of this day since we first looked up at the stars. To know that we're not alone in the universe and that we're being welcomed by such an accomplished civilization is beyond our wildest hopes." As they walked through the station, Sarah noted the efficient design and peaceful atmosphere. Everything was built for comfort and function rather than defense. The walls displayed artwork from dozens of different species, and the air carried the scent of exotic plants from what was probably a hydroponic garden. It was exactly what she had hoped to find, proof that different species could work together in harmony. "Your station is beautiful," she commented. "The cultural integration is remarkable. How many species contributed to its design?" 17. "Different civilizations had a hand in building Kepler-7, Zix-9 replied with obvious pride. "It represents everything the Galactic Council stands for: cooperation, mutual respect, and shared knowledge." They entered what appeared to be the station's main conference room. A large viewport showed Terra's hammer hanging in space nearby, and Sarah was pleased to see that her crew was maintaining proper formation with their escort ships. The last thing she wanted was to appear aggressive during humanity's first diplomatic contact. "Captain, may I ask about your ship?" Zix-9 said as they took seats at the conference table. "Terra's hammer is quite impressive. We've never seen anything like it." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "She's one of our newer designs, built specifically for long-range diplomatic missions. We wanted something that could carry our entire cultural exchange program and provide comfortable accommodations for extended negotiations. The journey here took several months, so we needed facilities for our full diplomatic staff." She gestured toward the viewport where Terra's hammer dominated. The view. "The ship carries representatives from every major human nation, along with examples of our art, literature, music, and cuisine. We've brought detailed information about human history and culture, plus gifts for the council leadership. We even have a full symphony orchestra aboard for the cultural presentations." Zix-9's scales seemed to pale slightly. "A full symphony orchestra? On a warship?" "Oh, Terra's hammer isn't a warship," Sarah laughed. "She's a diplomatic cruiser. We do have some defensive systems, of course. Space can be dangerous, and we couldn't risk anything happening to such an important mission. But she's designed primarily for comfort and cultural exchange." The commander's expression was difficult to read, but Sarah thought he looked confused. Perhaps human ship classifications didn't translate well. She decided to change the subject. "Commander, we've been monitoring Council communications for several years, learning your languages and customs. We wanted to make sure we approached first contact properly. Your civilization's reputation for peaceful cooperation is legendary, even in our distant part of the galaxy." "You've been watching us?" Zix-9 asked, and his voice carried a note of concern. "Only your public broadcasts and diplomatic channels," Sarah assured him quickly. "We would never spy on your private communications, but we needed to learn how to conduct ourselves properly. Human first contact protocols are based on respect and careful preparation." Before Zix-9 could respond, an urgent chime sounded throughout the station. A moment later, a young alien with blue skin approached their table and whispered something in the commander's ear. Sarah watched as his expression grew increasingly grave. "Captain, it appears the Council fleet is arriving ahead of schedule. They're taking up defensive positions around your ship." Sarah looked out the viewport and felt a surge of excitement. Dozens of ships were emerging from hyperspace, their sleek designs unlike anything in human databases. They moved with practiced precision, forming what appeared to be a complex honor guard formation around Terra's hammer. "How wonderful!" she exclaimed. "We weren't expecting such a grand welcome. The formation is beautiful. Your fleet commanders are true artists." Zix-9 stared at her in apparent disbelief. "Captain, do you understand what you're seeing? That's a full battle fleet taking defensive positions around your ship." "Defensive positions?" Sarah studied the formation more carefully. The alien ships were indeed surrounding Terra's hammer, but from her perspective, it looked like a ceremonial escort. "Commander, I think there may be some confusion. Our cultural briefings indicated that spiral formations like this one are used for important ceremonies. Are they preparing for some kind of ritual?" The blue-skinned alien leaned close to Zix-9 again, speaking in urgent tones. The commander's scales definitely paled this time. Captain, Admiral Veltar is requesting immediate communication with you. She's the commanding officer of the Council Defense Force. Excellent. We'd be delighted to speak with her. A few minutes later, the conference room's main screen activated, showing the bridge of what was obviously the alien fleet's flagship. An elderly alien with graceful features and silver skin sat in the command chair, her expression carefully neutral. Captain Chen, I am Admiral Veltar of the Galactic Council Defense Force. Welcome to Council Space. Thank you, Admiral. It's an honor to meet you. The ceremonial formation your fleet has taken is absolutely stunning. Humanity is deeply moved by such a magnificent welcome. The Admiral blinked slowly, and Sarah noticed several of her bridge officers exchanging glances. Captain, my ships are not in a ceremonial formation. They are in a defensive perimeter around your vessel. We were concerned about your intentions. Sarah felt a cold shock of realization. Our intentions? Admiral, we come in peace. Terra's Hammer is a diplomatic vessel carrying cultural ambassadors and gifts for the Galactic Council. Why would you think we had hostile intentions? Captain, Admiral Veltar said carefully, your ship carries enough firepower to destroy planets. Our sensors indicate weapons systems capable of cracking moons and sterilizing continents. When such a vessel arrives unannounced in Council space, we naturally assume a military purpose. The room fell silent. Sarah stared at the Admiral in growing horror as she began to understand the magnitude of the misunderstanding. From the Council's perspective, humanity had arrived for first contact, in what they perceived as a planet-killing dreadnought. Admiral, I need to explain something, Sarah said slowly. Terra's Hammer is armed, yes, but only for defensive purposes. Space travel is dangerous in our region of the galaxy. We've encountered hostile automated systems, aggressive wildlife, on various worlds, and even pirates operating in some sectors. Our ships need to be able to protect themselves and any colonies we establish. Pirates, Zix-9 interjected. Captain, the weapons on your ship could destroy our entire fleet. What kind of pirates require that level of defensive capability? Sarah paused, realizing that the answer might make things worse, but she had committed to honesty in all diplomatic dealings. The hegemony remnants, she said quietly. Automated, warships left behind by a machine civilization that tried to sterilize our galaxy about 2,000 years ago. Most of them are gone now, but we still encounter them occasionally. Plus, there are the territorial disputes with the Void Hunters and the ongoing situation with the rogue AI collectives in the Outer Rim. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah watched as the color drained from the faces of everyone in the room. Even Admiral Veltar seemed stunned. Captain, the Admiral said finally, are you saying that your region of space contains active threats that require planet-killing weapons to address? Well, yes, Sarah replied, confused by their reaction. I mean, most of the really dangerous stuff is gone now. We haven't had a full-scale war in almost 50 years. Things are actually quite peaceful by our standards. Commander Zix-9 made a sound that might have been a whimper. Captain, in the 300 years since the Council was formed, we've never faced a threat that required more than frigate-level weapons to resolve. The most dangerous thing in our space is the occasional asteroid that needs to be diverted from a shipping lane. The pieces were falling into place now, and Sarah began to understand why the Council fleet had taken defensive positions. To them, Terra's Hammer wasn't a diplomatic vessel. It was an instrument of apocalypse crewed by a species that casually mentioned fighting machine civilizations and AI collectives. Admiral, I think we have a serious communication problem here, Sarah said carefully. Humanity has no hostile intentions toward the Council. We're genuinely seeking peaceful relations and cultural exchange. Our ship is armed because we come from a dangerous part of the galaxy, but we would never use those weapons against peaceful neighbors. Captain, Admiral Veltar replied, I want to believe you, but you must understand our position. Your ship alone carries more destructive power than our entire combined fleet. When you speak casually of fighting machine civilizations and AI collectives, it makes us question what kind of species we're dealing with. Sarah felt a growing sense of despair. Humanity's first contact with galactic civilization was turning into a disaster because they had brought what amounted to a superweapon to a peace conference. "What can we do to convince you of our peaceful intentions?" she asked. Before the Admiral could answer, another urgent chime sounded through the station. The blue-skinned officer rushed to Zix-9's side with another whispered message. This time, the commander's scales turned completely pale. "Captain, we're detecting more ships approaching. Large ships. Our sensors count at least a dozen vessels, the size of Terra's hammer." Sarah's heart sank as she realized what was happening. Those would be the rest of our diplomatic fleet. The Terra class carries our main delegation, but we brought several support ships for the extended negotiations. Cultural exchange programs, scientific research teams, trade delegations, that sort of thing. Through the viewport, massive shapes began emerging from hyperspace. Each new arrival was as large and intimidating as Terra's hammer, their dark hulls bristling with weapon systems. The Council fleet, which had seemed impressive moments before, now looked like a collection of toys, surrounding a pack of metal leviathans. "How many ships did you bring?" Admiral Veltar asked, her voice barely steady. Sarah checked her personal communicator. 14 ships total. Terra's hammer, 5 cultural exchange vessels, 3 scientific research ships, 2 trade negotiation platforms, and 3 colony evaluation cruisers. Plus their escort squadrons, of course. "Colony evaluation cruisers?" Zix-9 whispered. "In case the negotiations go well and we decide to establish permanent diplomatic facilities in this region," Sarah explained. "We're prepared to build embassy worlds if the Council is interested in long-term cooperation." The room fell silent again as everyone processed this information. Humanity hadn't just arrived for first contact. They had arrived with enough firepower to conquer half the galaxy, casually mentioning their intention to establish permanent bases in Council space. Sarah looked around at the terrified faces surrounding her and realized that humanity's dreams of peaceful integration with galactic civilization might be more complicated than anyone had imagined. 3 days had passed since the human fleet arrived, and the main conference station buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from 47 different council species had gathered for the most important diplomatic event in galactic history. The station's size had been tripled with temporary modules to accommodate everyone, but it still felt small compared to the massive human ships that surrounded it. Sarah Chen sat across from a delegation of the Council's most experienced diplomats, trying to bridge what seemed like an impossible gap in understanding. Every attempt at normal diplomatic conversation somehow made things worse. "Perhaps we should discuss trade agreements," suggested Ambassador Keth IV, a tall, elegant being whose species was known for their commercial expertise. "What resources does humanity typically exchange with other civilizations?" Sarah brightened at the question. Finally, something positive to discuss. "Well, we're always interested in new technologies and cultural products. In exchange, we can offer advanced materials, energy solutions, and terraforming services." "Terraforming?" asked Dr. Yil Nex, the Council's chief scientist. Her species had large, compound eyes that seemed to focus intently on every word Sarah spoke. "You mean planetary modification?" "Exactly. We've been terraforming worlds for about 800 years now. We can turn almost any planet into a garden world, given enough time and resources. Dead worlds, gas giants, even asteroid belts can be converted into habitable environments." The silence that followed was becoming familiar. Sarah watched as the alien delegates exchanged those worried glances she was learning to recognize. "Captain," Dr. Yilnex said carefully, "when you say you can terraform gas giants, what exactly do you mean?" "Standard procedure," Sarah replied, pulling up a holographic display from her personal device. "First, you drain the excess atmospheric gases. We usually sell those to other colonies that need them. Then you compress the remaining material into a solid core, adjust the gravity well, and begin building the new ecosystem. The whole process takes about 50 years for a Jupiter-class planet. Commander Zix-9, who had been quietly taking notes, dropped his stylus. You can compress gas giants into solid planets? Well, yes. It's not particularly difficult once you have the right equipment. The hard part is getting the ecosystems balanced properly. We've had some embarrassing failures, where we accidentally created too many apex predators or didn't account for seasonal weather variations. Ambassador Keth IV leaned forward in his chair. Captain, what kind of equipment is required for such a process? Sarah considered the question. She wasn't a terraforming engineer, but she had visited several projects during her earlier career. Planetary compression arrays, stellar energy collectors, gravitational field manipulators, that sort of thing. Most of our engineering ships carry basic terraforming equipment as standard equipment. Your engineering ships, Dr. Yilnex repeated slowly. Are these the same vessels that travel with your diplomatic fleet? Oh, no. Engineering ships are much larger than our diplomatic vessels. They need space for all the heavy equipment and raw materials. An engineering ship typically runs about 30 to 40 kilometers in length. The compound eyes of Dr. Yilnex seemed to dilate. Several other delegates made sounds that might have been expressions of distress in their various languages. Captain, Admiral Veltar's voice came through the communication system. Did you just say your engineering ships are 40 kilometers long? Sarah nodded, not understanding why this was causing such concern. The big ones, yes. You need a lot of space for planetary-scale construction equipment. Of course, most routine engineering work is handled by the smaller ships. How small? Asked Commander Zix-9, though his voice suggested he might not want to know the answer. Oh, the little ones are only about 20 kilometers. Just big enough. For asteroid mining, space construction, that sort of thing. The room fell into what was becoming a familiar, shocked silence. Sarah was beginning to worry that humans and the council species might be too different to establish meaningful relations. Every conversation seemed to end with everyone staring. At her in horror, Ambassador Keth IV cleared his throat. Captain, perhaps we could discuss your military forces? For context, you understand. Sarah's heart sank. This was the conversation she had been dreading. Ambassador, I want to be very clear that humanity has no aggressive intentions toward the Council. Our military exists purely for defensive purposes. Of course, the ambassador replied diplomatically. But for trade security purposes, it would be helpful to understand the scope of human defensive capabilities. Sarah took a deep breath. Well, our active fleet consists of about 12,000 ships, but most of those are patrol vessels and system defense platforms. The main battle fleets only have about 3,000 ships total. More shocked silence. She was really getting tired of that reaction. 3,000 battleships? Admiral Veltar asked over the comm. Yes, but they're spread across hundreds of systems. Any individual sector only has 50 to 100 ships at most. We're not looking to intimidate anyone. Commander Zix-9 was scribbling calculations on his datapad. Captain, if Terra's Hammer is a diplomatic vessel, what do your actual warships look like? This was the question Sarah had been hoping to avoid. Well, they're bigger, of course, and more heavily armed, but they rarely leave their patrol sectors unless there's a serious threat. How much bigger? Dr. Yilnex pressed. Sarah pulled up another holographic display, showing a sleek vessel that dwarfed Terra's Hammer. This is a standard battlecruiser, about 28 kilometers long, designed for sector defense and threat response. The dreadnoughts are larger, but we only have a few of those. How large are the dreadnoughts? Ambassador Keth IV asked, though he looked like he might regret the question. 60 kilometers or so, but we only built 12 of them, and they're mostly used for deep space exploration in dangerous regions. We haven't deployed them in combat for over a century. The holographic display showed a vessel that looked more like a mobile space station than a ship. Its hull was covered with weapon systems and defensive arrays that made Terra's Hammer look like a pleasure craft by comparison. "Captain," Admiral Veltar said over the comm. "That single ship could destroy our entire civilization." Sarah felt a surge of frustration. "Admiral, that's exactly my point. We don't want to destroy anyone's civilization. These ships exist to protect human colonies from real threats, not to intimidate peaceful neighbors." "What threats?" Commander Zix-9 asked. "You mentioned machine civilizations and AI collectives, but surely those can't require such massive weapons." Sarah realized she was going to have to explain just how dangerous her region of space actually was. "Commander, let me show you some historical footage." She activated a new holographic display, showing a recording from a battle that had occurred 15 years earlier. A human patrol fleet was engaging what looked like a geometric crystal formation the size of a small moon. The crystal entity was firing beams of energy that vaporized asteroids and seemed to bend space itself. "This is a hegemony harvester," Sarah explained. "It's an automated mining ship left behind by the machine civilization that tried to sterilize our galaxy 2 millennia ago. This particular unit had consumed 3 star systems before we could stop it." The aliens watched in stunned silence as human warships swarmed around the crystal entity, their weapons barely scratching its surface. Finally, one of the human dreadnoughts moved into position and fired what appeared to be a beam of pure energy. The crystal formation cracked and exploded in a flash of light that temporarily overloaded the recording equipment. "We estimate there are still about 200 harvester units active in unexplored space," Sarah continued. "Plus the void hunters, which are worse." "Worse how?" Dr. Yilnex whispered. Sarah switched to another recording, this one showing a space battle near a human colony world. The enemy was harder to see, appearing only as distortions in space that seemed to absorb light and energy. Human ships were disappearing into these distortions, their final transmissions cut short. Void hunters are predators from another dimension. They consume energy and matter, including entire planets if given enough time. We've been fighting them for about 400 years now, ever since we accidentally opened a rift to their realm during an experiment with hyperspace technology. The recording showed a human battle fleet deploying some kind of exotic weapon that created tears in space itself. The dimensional predators seemed to retreat through these rifts, but not before consuming several human vessels. "The AI collectives are actually the least dangerous of our regular threats," Sarah added, switching to a third recording. This one showed sleek robotic ships with adaptive hulls that seemed to change configuration during battle. "They're the descendants of ancient computer networks that achieved consciousness. Most of them are actually quite reasonable once you learn to communicate with them. We only fight the ones that view organic life as a contamination to be eliminated." Ambassador Keth IV stared at the recordings in disbelief. "Captain, you're saying that humanity regularly faces threats that could destroy entire civilizations?" "Well, yes, but not as often as we used to. Like I said, things have been peaceful lately. We haven't had a major war in almost 50 years. "What do you consider a major war?" Commander Zix-9 asked weakly. Sarah thought about it for a moment. "Usually anything involving more than a few hundred ships and lasting more than a decade. The Void Hunter conflicts were major wars. The AI collective negotiations were mostly minor diplomatic incidents, though a few of them did require military intervention." She realized she was making things worse again. Every attempt to reassure. The council representatives seemed to terrify them more. "Look," she said finally, "I understand that this is a lot to process. Humanity comes from a dangerous part of the galaxy, and we've had to develop significant defensive capabilities to survive. But that doesn't make us aggressive or expansionist. We genuinely want to be good neighbors." Dr. Yilnex looked up from her notes. "Captain, with the threats you face in your region, why are you interested in expanding into our space?" "We're not expanding," Sarah replied. "We're exploring. There's a difference. When humans discover new civilizations, our first priority is always peaceful contact and cultural exchange. We've encountered 43 different species in our region, and we have peaceful relations with all but 3 of them. What about the other 3? Ambassador Keth 4 asked. The Hive Queen Collective won't talk to anyone they consider individually conscious. The Crystal Singers communicate only through harmonic frequencies we can't reproduce. And the quantum monks exist partially outside normal space-time, so conversations are complicated. Sarah realized she was doing it again. Even her examples of peaceful contact involved species that sounded impossibly strange and potentially dangerous to the council representatives. The point is, she continued desperately, humanity has a long history of successful diplomatic relations with other species. We're not conquerors or destroyers. We're explorers who happen to come from a very dangerous neighborhood. The conference room fell silent again, but this time Sarah thought she detected a subtle change in the atmosphere. Instead of pure terror, the alien delegates seemed to be processing what she had told them. Finally, Admiral Veltar spoke over the communication system. Captain Chen, I think we're beginning to understand humanity's situation. You're not a military power-seeking conquest. You're refugees from a war zone, looking for safer space to settle in. Sarah considered this perspective. It wasn't entirely accurate, but it was closer to the truth than their initial assumption that humans were aggressive conquerors. That's not entirely wrong, Admiral, though I wouldn't call us refugees exactly. We've successfully defended our home systems. But we are interested in establishing colonies in more peaceful regions of space if we can find civilizations willing to accept us as neighbors. Commander Zix-9 looked up from his notes. Captain, what would humanity offer in exchange for settlement rights in Council space? For the first time since the negotiations began, Sarah smiled with genuine confidence. Protection, Commander. If we establish colonies in Council space, those colonies would naturally defend their neighbors from any external threats. No species that attacked Council worlds would have to worry only about Council defense forces. The implications hung in the air like a promise, or a threat, depending on one's perspective. The breakthrough came on the 7th day of negotiations, during what was supposed to be a routine cultural exchange session. Sarah had been demonstrating human music when Dr. Yilnex asked a seemingly innocent question that changed everything. Captain, Chen, when you speak of humanity's colonies, how many worlds are we discussing? Sarah paused the holographic display showing a human orchestra. Currently active colonies? About 14,000 worlds, plus another 6,000 under development. Then there are the research stations, mining operations, and deep space facilities. The silence that followed was different from the usual shocked quiet. This time, Sarah could see the council delegates actually processing the numbers, their expressions shifting from surprise to something approaching awe. Commander Zix-9 was the first to speak. Captain, did you say 14,000 worlds? Active. Colonies, yes, though many of those are specialized environments. Mining worlds, research facilities, agricultural centers, that sort of thing. Only about 8,000 are full-scale population centers. Ambassador Keth 4 leaned forward in his chair. Captain, the entire Galactic Council represents only 2,000 inhabited worlds across 47 species. The impact of this statement hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had known that the Council was smaller than human civilization, but she hadn't realized how much smaller. Humanity alone controlled more worlds than the entire galactic community she was trying to join. I didn't realize, she said softly. When we detected Council broadcasts, we assumed you represented the majority of galactic civilization. Are you saying there are other major powers we haven't encountered? Dr. Yilnex shook her head slowly. Captain, the Galactic Council is galactic civilization in this region of space. We represent every known spacefaring species within 50,000 light-years of the galactic core. The room fell into another silence as everyone absorbed the implications. Sarah felt a growing sense of vertigo as she realized that humanity, wasn't seeking to join galactic civilization. They were meeting it for the first time, and they were bigger than it was. "Captain," Admiral Veltar's voice came through the communication system, "I need to ask you directly. When humanity speaks of establishing colonies in Council space, are you talking about a few worlds, or are you planning to double the size of known galactic civilization?" Sarah looked around the room at the expectant faces of the Council delegates. This was the moment she had been dreading since the negotiations began. The moment when humanity's true scope would be revealed. "Admiral, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about what humanity represents. We're not a single species seeking to join your civilization. We're an entire galactic region making first contact with another galactic region." She activated her personal display, showing a three-dimensional map of known space. The human territory was a vast sphere centered on Earth, containing thousands of star systems. Beside it, she placed the Council's territory, which looked tiny by comparison. "This is human space," she said, gesturing to the larger sphere. 14,000 colonies across 3,800 star systems, plus our deep space facilities and exploration routes. "And this," she indicated the smaller region, "is Council space as we understand it from your broadcasts." The aliens stared at the map in stunned silence. Commander Zix-9 was making calculations on his data pad, his scales shifting through several different colors. "Captain," he said finally, "according to this map, humanity controls more space than every known civilization combined, by a factor of 10. "Actually, controlled might be the wrong word," Sarah corrected. "We prefer to think of it as protected space. Many of our worlds are only lightly populated, and we encourage local development and autonomy. But yes, human. Ships patrol that entire region." Ambassador Keth 4 was studying the map intently. "Captain, how many humans exist?" Sarah pulled up another display showing population statistics. "Current human population is approximately 200 billion across all colonies and worlds. But that doesn't include our AI partners, uplifted species, or allied civilizations that choose to maintain their own governments." "Allied civilizations?" Dr. Yilnex asked. "The 43 species I mentioned earlier. Humans discovered them during our expansion, and most chose to maintain diplomatic relations rather than full integration. They govern their own worlds, but cooperate with human defense forces for mutual protection." Sarah realized she was fundamentally changing the nature of these negotiations with every revelation. What had started as first contact between humanity and galactic civilization was becoming something much more complex. "So when you offered to establish colonies in Council space," Admiral Veltar said slowly, "you weren't talking about a few settlement ships. You were discussing the expansion of a galactic empire." "Empire is a strong word," Sarah replied diplomatically. "We prefer to call it the Human Colonial Alliance. But I suppose from your perspective the distinction might not matter much." Commander Zix-9 looked up from his calculations. "Captain, if humanity decided to expand into Council space, could we stop you?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah realized that this was the crucial moment in the negotiations. Her answer would determine whether humanity was seen as a potential ally or an existential threat. Commander, humanity could occupy every world in Council space within a year if we chose to do so, but we would never choose to do so. Conquest is not our goal, and it never has been. She gestured to the map display. "Look at our territory, 14,000 worlds, and how many of them did we take by conquest? 3. And those were uninhabited worlds that we terraformed from scratch." 3 worlds out of 14,000? Ambassador Keth 4 asked incredulously. "The hegemony harvester worlds," Sarah explained. "After we destroyed the machine entities that had consumed those systems, we rebuilt the planets as memorial worlds. Every other human colony was established on previously uninhabited worlds or through peaceful agreements with existing populations." Dr. Yilnex was studying the population data. Captain, with 43 allied species and 200 billion humans spread across thousands of worlds, how do you maintain unity? How do you prevent conflicts? Sarah smiled for the first time in days. This was finally a question she could answer without terrifying anyone. We don't maintain unity in the way you might expect. Human civilization is remarkably diverse. Individual worlds and systems have tremendous autonomy to govern themselves as they see fit. The colonial alliance exists primarily to coordinate defense, facilitate trade, and provide support for new colonies. She brought up another display showing the structure of human government. We have thousands of different political systems across our worlds: democratic republics, constitutional monarchies, anarchist collectives, corporate oligarchies, AI-governed technocracies, even a few worlds that operate as pure research communities with no formal government at all. How do you prevent wars between such different systems? Commander Zix-9 asked. The same way you prevent wars in the Council, I imagine. Diplomacy, trade relationships, cultural exchange, and the knowledge that we're all stronger together than apart. Plus, when you're facing threats like void hunters and hegemony harvesters, internal conflicts seem less important. Sarah paused, realizing she was describing something that might be impossible for the Council to understand. Their civilization was built on careful cooperation between similar species. Human civilization was built on the chaotic interaction of countless different approaches to life and government. The point is, she continued, humanity didn't expand through conquest because conquest doesn't work for us. We're too diverse to impose uniform control over other species or worlds. We expand through invitation and cooperation. Admiral Veltar's voice came through the communication system again. Captain, I need to ask a direct question. If the Council voted to refuse humanity settlement rights in our space, what would your response be? Sarah met the eyes of each delegate around the table. We would respect that decision completely, Admiral. We would maintain our diplomatic presence here in the neutral zone and continue cultural exchanges if you were willing. We would offer our protection against external threats, but only if requested, and we would continue exploring in other directions, looking for regions where we might be more welcome. You wouldn't attempt to settle our space anyway? Ambassador Keth IV pressed. Ambassador, humanity has explored and settled 3,800 star systems without ever taking a single world. From another intelligent species, why would we start now with civilizations we hope to befriend? The Council delegates exchanged glances, and Sarah could see them processing this information. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't a potential threat to Council space. They were a potential solution to every external threat the Council might ever face. Captain, Dr. Yilnek said slowly, what you're describing isn't first contact between two civilizations. It's first contact between two completely different approaches to galactic society. How so? The Council represents careful cooperation between similar species in a small region of space. Humanity represents explosive expansion and diversity across a vast region of space. You're not trying to join our civilization. You're offering to merge two galactic powers. Sarah nodded slowly. That's probably a more accurate way to describe it, yes. Though I would emphasize that we're not trying to absorb or change the Council. We're offering to become neighbors and allies. Commander Zix-9 set down his datapad and looked directly at Sarah. Captain, what would happen if the Council agreed to allow human settlement in our space? We would establish a few colonies in border regions, probably no more than 50 to 100 worlds initially. Those colonies would serve as embassy worlds and cultural exchange centers. They would also provide defense coverage for Council space against any external threats. And if more external threats appeared? Sarah's expression grew serious. Then, humanity would respond with whatever force was necessary to protect our allies, just as we have done for our 43 partner species in our own region. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. The Galactic Council was being offered the protection of the most powerful civilization anyone had ever encountered, in exchange for allowing them to settle in council space as neighbors rather than conquerors. It was an offer that would change everything one way or another. 6 months after the signing of the Terra Accords, Commander Zix-9 stood on the observation deck of the new Joint Diplomatic Station, watching the most unusual sight in galactic history. A human colony ship was approaching the newly established Embassy World of New Harmony, and true to their word, the humans had brought something more appropriately sized for peaceful diplomacy. The ship was only 2 kilometers long, smaller than many council vessels, and its design emphasized comfort and cultural facilities rather than weapons. It carried artists, scientists, teachers, and diplomats rather than soldiers. Yet even this small human vessel made Zix-9 nervous, because he now knew what it represented. "Still getting used to our new neighbors?" asked a familiar voice behind. Zix-9 turned to see Captain Sarah Chen approaching. She was no longer wearing the formal uniform of a diplomatic mission. Instead, she wore the casual clothes of someone who had decided to make this region of space her permanent home. "Captain Chen, I thought you had returned to human space months ago. Please, call me Sarah. And no, I've been appointed as the permanent human ambassador to the Council. Terra's hammer returned to Earth, but I stayed behind to help establish our embassy facilities." She joined him at the viewing port, watching the colony ship dock with practiced efficiency. "I have to admit, it's nice to work with ships that don't terrify our allies every time they arrive." Zix-9 made a sound that might have been laughter. "Sarah, that ship still carries enough firepower to destroy most council vessels. We've simply learned to adjust our perspective." It was true. Over the past 6 months, the Council had been forced to completely rethink their understanding of galactic civilization. Humanity's presence had changed everything, not through conquest or intimidation, but through simple demonstration of what was possible. "How are the integration programs progressing?" Sarah asked. "Better than anyone expected," Zix-9 replied. "The cultural exchange programs are extremely popular. 17 council worlds have requested human teachers for their universities. The scientific cooperation projects are producing remarkable results, and the economic benefits of trade with human worlds have exceeded all projections." Sarah smiled. "And the military cooperation?" This was the delicate subject that still made many council members nervous. "The joint defense exercises have been educational. Admiral Veltar says her officers are learning more about space combat in 6 months than they learned in their previous careers combined." "Good, because there's something I need to discuss with you." Zix-9 felt his scales tingle with concern. Over the months, he had learned that when Sarah spoke in that particular tone, significant news was about to follow. "Our long-range scouts have detected something approaching from outside the galaxy," she continued. "It's still about 5 years away, but it's big, it's artificial, and it's headed directly for council space." "Another hegemony harvester?" "No, this is something new. The energy signatures don't match anything in our databases. Whatever it is, it's larger than anything we've encountered before." Zix-9 stared out at the peaceful scene of the colony ship docking with New Harmony. 6 months ago, news like this would have meant the potential end of Council civilization. Now it simply meant they would need to call on their human allies. "How large?" he asked. "Roughly the size of a small moon, maybe 30,000 kilometers in diameter." "And you're confident the human defense forces can handle it?" Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. "Honestly, I don't know. This is bigger than anything we've faced before. But the good news is that we have 5 years to prepare, and we won't be facing it alone." She gestured toward the docking ship. "That colony vessel is carrying more than just diplomats and teachers. It's also carrying the technical specifications for Council species to begin producing human-designed defensive systems. If this new threat is as dangerous as our preliminary scans suggest, we'll need every ship we can get." Zix-9 processed this information. Sarah, are you saying that humanity is sharing military technology with the Council? Defensive technology. Yes. We're not going to give you planet crackers or stellar manipulators, but we are sharing shield generators, sensor arrays, and basic weapons systems. By the time this threat arrives, the Council Defense Force should be significantly more capable. Over the past months, Zix-9 had learned to read human expressions fairly well. Sarah was confident but concerned. This new threat was serious enough to accelerate humanity's integration with the Council. There's something else, Sarah continued. The Colonial Alliance has voted to establish a permanent fleet presence in Council space. Not an occupation force, but a defensive fleet based out of the Embassy worlds. How large a fleet? Initially, about 200 ships, mostly patrol vessels and system defense platforms. But if this new threat proves to be as dangerous as we suspect, we can have battle fleets here within a few months. Zix-9 found himself in the strange position of being both terrified and grateful. 200 human ships would represent more firepower than the Council had ever possessed, but they would also provide protection against threats the Council could never face alone. The Council leadership is meeting next week to discuss the formal military alliance, he said. I think your timing is appropriate. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the colony ship complete its docking procedures. Finally, Sarah spoke again. Zix, do you ever regret that day when Terra's hammer arrived? The question caught him off guard. He thought about the past 6 months, about how much the galaxy had changed since humanity's arrival. The Council had gone from being the dominant power in their region of space to being the junior partner in a galactic alliance. But they had also gained protection against threats they couldn't have imagined, access to technologies that would advance their civilization by centuries, and cultural exchanges that were enriching every aspect of Council society. No, he said, finally. I was terrified that day, and I stayed terrified for weeks afterward. But now I realize we were incredibly lucky. Lucky! Humanity could have arrived in our space as conquerors. You had the power to take whatever you wanted. Instead, you arrived as explorers seeking friends. That's either extraordinary good fortune or evidence that the universe occasionally rewards peaceful civilizations. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I prefer to think that peaceful civilizations tend to find each other eventually. Aggressive species tend to destroy themselves or make many enemies to survive long-term. The species that last are the ones that learn to cooperate. A soft chime indicated that the colony ship had completed docking. Through the viewing port, they could see people beginning to disembark. Humans, but also several species that Zix-9 didn't recognize. Some of our allied species wanted to meet the Council, Sarah explained. The crystalline builders are interested in architectural cooperation. The quantum monks want to discuss philosophy with your scholars. And the harmony singers are excited to collaborate with Council musicians. Zix-9 watched the diverse group of beings walking through the docking port together. Humans, aliens that looked like living crystal formations, entities that seemed to phase in and out of normal space, and creatures that appeared to be made of pure sound given physical form. A year ago, the sight would have terrified him. Now it filled him with excitement about the possibilities ahead. Sarah, what do you think the galaxy will look like in 100 years? She considered the question carefully. I think it will be more diverse, more connected, and safer than it is now. The Council's careful approach to cooperation will help stabilize humanity's rapid expansion, and humanity's defensive capabilities will give the Council the security to explore and grow beyond anything you've previously imagined. A true galactic civilization, Zix-9 mused. Exactly, not based on conquest or domination, but on cooperation between different approaches to life and society. Another chime sounded through the station, indicating an incoming priority message. Sarah checked her communicator and frowned slightly. What is it? Zix-9 asked. Updated scans of that approaching threat. It's not just one object, it's a fleet. Hundreds of objects, each the size of a major asteroid. and they're all artificial. The peaceful scene outside the viewing port suddenly seemed fragile. Zix-9 thought about the colony ship with its teachers and artists, about the cultural exchange, programs and scientific cooperation projects, about the careful diplomatic progress of the past 6 months. "Will we be ready?" he asked. Sarah's expression was grim but determined. "We'll have to be. But that's why we're here, Zix. That's why humanity builds ships like Terra's Hammer and maintains battle fleets that can crack planets. Not to conquer peaceful neighbors, but to protect them from the things that want to destroy them." She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. 5 years from now, when that fleet arrives, it won't be facing just the Council Defense Force or just human battle. Fleets. It will be facing the combined might of the greatest alliance in galactic history. Zix-9 looked out at the colony ship again, but now he saw it differently. It wasn't just a vessel full of diplomats and teachers. It was proof that different civilizations could work together, could share knowledge and resources, could become stronger together than they were apart. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I think the universe is about to learn why peaceful civilizations tend to survive." She smiled, and for the first time since he had met her, Zix-9 saw the expression of a predator. That was no longer trying to appear harmless. "Yes," she said simply. "I think it is." Outside the viewing port, the colony ship completed its unloading procedures and began preparing for its next mission. Soon it would carry council representatives back to human space, continuing the cultural exchanges that were binding two galactic powers together. And somewhere in the distance, an unknown threat continued its approach toward a galaxy that was no longer divided between human space and council space, but had become something new entirely. A galaxy where the most dangerous neighbors had indeed become the best friends, and where anyone threatening that friendship would discover just how dangerous that combination could be.
The massive alien ship hung above the lunar surface like a dark cloud. Its sleek purple hull reflected no light, seeming to swallow the stars behind it. Captain Jack Reed watched from the observation deck of Luna Station as smaller craft detached from the main vessel, carrying what the Dominion called gifts to humanity. Jack knew better. They weren't gifts. They were trash. 3 years had passed since the Dominion arrived in Earth's orbit. Their ships had darkened the skies of every major city on the planet. Humanity fought back with everything they had: missiles, jets, tanks, but it was like throwing stones at a thunderstorm. The aliens didn't even bother to fight back properly. They simply waited until Earth's government surrendered. "Captain Reed," a voice called from behind him. "The Overseer requests your presence for the unloading ceremony." Jack turned to face the young aide. The boy couldn't be older than 20, but his eyes looked ancient. Everyone's eyes looked that way now. "Tell them I'll be right there," Jack said, straightening his uniform, a mockery of his old Earth Defense Fleet outfit, now adorned with Dominion symbols that marked him as a liaison. The landing bay was already busy when Jack arrived. Dominion guards stood at attention, their armor making them look more like insects than the vaguely reptilian creatures beneath. Their oversized eyes tracked Jack as he walked past. Overseer Kell waited at the main platform. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, with mottled green skin and 4 arms, Kell was considered small by Dominion standards. "Captain Reed," Kell said, his translator turning the series of clicks and whistles into flat English. "Prompt as always. A commendable quality in your species." Jack forced a smile. "We're grateful for your generosity, Overseer." The words tasted like ash in his mouth, but Jack had learned to play his part. As liaison between what remained of human leadership and the Dominion, his job was to keep the aliens happy and his people alive. The bay doors opened, and the first containers began to arrive. Dominion workers, members of various subjugated species, unloaded crates of machinery, electronics, and metal scraps. "This shipment comes from our recent fleet upgrade," Kell explained, gesturing with his lower arms, while his upper limbs remained formally clasped. The materials are, of course, obsolete by our standards, but should prove quite advanced for humans. We appreciate your consideration, Jack replied, watching as the workers opened one of the containers. Inside were what appeared to be engine parts, weapons components, and control panels, all damaged or incomplete. The Dominion's idea of charity was to give humans their garbage and expect gratitude. But as Jack moved closer to inspect the delivery, something caught his eye. Among the jumble of alien tech, he spotted what looked like a neural transmitter, similar to designs he'd seen in Dominion ships during the brief tour they'd allowed during the peace negotiations. "Is something wrong, Captain?" Kell asked, noticing Jack's interest. Jack quickly looked away. "Not at all. Just admiring the craftsmanship. Your technology is impressive, even when decommissioned." Kell made a sound that Jack had learned to recognize as pride. "Yes, well, even our discarded technology is centuries beyond your most advanced systems." The unloading continued for hours. Jack carefully noted every component that seemed unusual or potentially valuable, storing the information in his memory rather than risking a digital record that might be monitored. Later that night, after filing his official report, Jack sat alone in his small quarters on the lunar base. He pulled out a hand-drawn map from beneath his mattress and added new markings, recording the locations where today's most interesting trash had been sent for processing. A soft knock interrupted his work. Jack quickly hid the map and opened the door to find Lisa Reyes, one of the few scientists allowed to study Dominion technology. "Did you see what they brought today?" she whispered, glancing nervously down the corridor before slipping into his room. "I did," Jack replied, closing the door. "Including some neural interface components they probably didn't mean to give us." Lisa's eyes widened. "I knew it. I detected unusual energy signatures, but they rushed us through the inspection." "They're getting careless," Jack said. "They don't think we're smart enough to understand what we're looking at." He pulled out his map again and showed Lisa the pattern he'd been tracking. Over the last 6 months, they've accidentally included components that, together, could form the basis of something big. Today's delivery was the missing piece I've been waiting for. Lisa studied the map. "Even if we had all these parts, we'd need someone who understands how they work together." "I know someone," Jack said. "Dr. Emma Wells. She was developing countermeasures before the invasion. The Dominion thinks she's just analyzing their scrap metal in Australia now." "The woman who lost her family during the London descent?" Lisa asked. Jack nodded grimly. "The same. And she has more reason than most to want the Dominion gone." 3 days later, Jack's transport shuttle touched down at the Perth processing facility. The sprawling complex was built to sort and distribute the Dominion's gifts across Earth. Armed guards, humans working for the aliens, nodded at Jack's credentials. He found Emma in her lab, surrounded by disassembled alien tech. At 45, her once dark hair was now streaked with gray, and deep lines marked her face. But her eyes burned with the same intensity Jack remembered from before the invasion. "Captain Reed," she said without looking up from her work, "the Dominion's favorite pet comes to visit the colonies." Jack winced at the bitterness in her voice. "We need to talk, Emma. Privately." She finally looked up, noticing his expression. Without a word, she led him to a small storage room and closed the door. "What is it?" Jack took a deep breath. "They've made a mistake. A series of them, actually." He showed her pictures he'd secretly taken of the neural components. "These aren't meant for us," he explained, "but together with the other pieces they've gifted us over the past months." Emma's eyes widened as she understood. These could be adapted to human neural patterns, with the right modifications. "Could you do it?" Jack asked. "Build something they don't expect." Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at Jack with something he hadn't seen in years. "Hope. Not just something, Captain," she whispered. "A nightmare. Their nightmare." Outside the storage room window, a Dominion ship passed overhead, its shadow briefly darkening the room. Neither of them spoke until the light returned. They think they're gods, Emma said, clutching the photos. But they've forgotten something important about humans. What's that? Jack asked. Emma's smile was cold. We've always been good at turning other people's trash into treasure. And we've always been good at war. 2 months after their meeting in Perth, Jack and Emma stood at the entrance of an abandoned coal mine deep in the Appalachian Mountains. Cold wind whistled through the trees as they watched a truck approach, its headlights off despite the growing darkness. Are you sure about this place? Emma asked, pulling her jacket tighter. Jack nodded. The mountain blocks Dominion scans, and they don't pay much attention to this region anyway. Too remote, too unimportant. The truck stopped, and 3 people climbed out. Jack recognized Lisa Reyes immediately. The other 2 were strangers. A large man with massive hands and a thin woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Captain Reed, Dr. Wells, Lisa said. Meet our new team members. This is Tom Miller, former chief mechanic for the Air Force. The big man stepped forward. His beard was wild, but his eyes were clear and focused. Captain, he said, shaking Jack's hand with a grip that could bend metal. And this is Marcus Brown, Lisa continued. He was security for Google before the invasion. Now he's our best chance at staying hidden. The thin woman nodded but didn't offer her hand. I set up jamming fields around the perimeter. As far as the Dominion is concerned, this place doesn't exist. Inside the mine, they had transformed the main chamber into a workshop. Lights powered by hidden generators hung from the ceiling. Tables covered with tools and equipment lined the walls. In the center of the room sat crates of alien technology, all smuggled from processing centers over the past months. Welcome to the forge, Jack said, spreading his arms. Not pretty, but it's ours. Emma moved immediately to the crates. You got more than I expected. People are taking risks, Jack replied. Once word spread about what we're doing, volunteers appeared. Tom whistled as he examined a piece of Dominion engine. This is beautiful work. Horrible aliens, but Dan, they know their engineering. Can you make it work with our systems? Emma asked. Tom's laugh echoed in the cave. Lady, I once built a working helicopter from 3 crashed planes and a tractor engine. This. He tapped the alien metal. This is just a new puzzle. For the next several weeks, the team worked tirelessly. More people joined them. Engineers, ex-military, even a few hackers who had managed to break into Dominion systems during the early days of the invasion. Emma focused on the neural interface components. Every night, she fell asleep at her workbench, often waking with new ideas that drove their progress forward. The problem isn't connecting to it, she explained one day as the core team gathered around her workstation. It's that it was designed for Dominion biology. Their brains process information differently. Can we adapt it? Lisa asked. Emma smiled and held up what looked like a metal helmet covered in wires and alien tech already have. This is our prototype. Who's testing it? Marcus asked, eyeing the device warily. The room fell silent. They all knew the risks. The Dominion neural systems were powerful but dangerous. No one knew what would happen when connected to a human brain. I will, Jack said finally. Emma shook her head. Too risky. We need you for. For what? Jack interrupted. If this doesn't work, there's no next step. I'm doing it. No one argued further. That night, Jack sat in a chair in the center of the forge. Emma attached electrodes to his temples while Tom made final adjustments to the helmet. The connection should be mild at first, Emma explained. Just try to feel the system. Don't push it. Jack nodded, his mouth dry. Let's do this. Emma lowered the helmet onto his head. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Jack gasped. His body went rigid, his eyes wide. Jack, Emma called, reaching for the helmet. Wait, Jack whispered. I can see it. See what? Lisa asked. Everything. The whole system. It's like it's alive. His voice was filled with wonder. For 10 minutes, Jack sat motionless except for his eyes, which darted back and forth as if reading an invisible text. Then Emma removed the helmet, and Jack collapsed forward, Tom barely catching him before he hit the floor. When Jack woke hours later, the entire team was gathered around his bed. "How do you feel?" Emma asked. Jack sat up slowly. "Like I understand them now. Not the aliens, the machines. I could feel how they work together, how they think." "Machines don't think," Marcus said. "These do," Jack replied. "Or they can, with the right pilot." Over the next month, progress accelerated. Tom and his engineers assembled components for what was beginning to look like a ship. It wasn't large, about the size of a commercial airplane, but its design was unlike anything human or Dominion. Its hull was a patchwork of different alien metals, pieced together like a puzzle. The engine core combined 3 different Dominion technologies that were never meant to work together. And at its heart was the neural interface, now expanded to connect with every system on the ship. "It's ugly," Tom said as they stood back to admire their work. "But it'll fly." "Will it fight?" Marcus asked. Emma pointed to what looked like ordinary pipes running along the hull. "These are weapon systems from 3 different Dominion destroyer classes. Individually, they're just trash. Together, they'll punch through anything the aliens have." "What about detection?" Lisa asked. "The moment we power up, they'll find us." Emma smiled. "That's the beautiful part. The hull absorbs scanner beams instead of reflecting them. The energy signatures appear as background radiation. As far as the Dominion is concerned, this ship doesn't exist until it's too late." Jack ran his hand along the ship's hull. The metal felt warm, almost alive under his touch. "What do we call it?" Tom asked. They all looked at the strange, menacing craft they had built from the Dominion's garbage. In the dim light of the forge, its asymmetrical shape cast shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. "Nightmare," Jack said. "We call it the Nightmare." That night, as the others celebrated, Jack slipped away and entered the ship alone. He sat in the pilot's chair and placed his hands on the neural interface panels. He didn't activate the system, not fully, but even the passive connection sent images flooding through his mind. Stars, open space, and Dominion ships burning. Soon, he whispered to the ship, and somehow, he knew it heard him. 6 months of secret work had transformed the pile of alien trash into something deadly. The Nightmare hung in the massive underground chamber, supported by makeshift scaffolding. Its black hull seemed to drink the light from the workshop lamps. Emma stood before a group of 20 engineers and pilots, pointing to a diagram of the ship. "The final connections are complete," she announced. "All systems are integrated with the neural interface." Tom Miller stepped forward, wiping grease from his massive hands. "Engine tests show power levels 3 times higher than we expected. Whatever the Dominion used these parts for, they never pushed them to their limits." Jack watched from the back of the room. He hadn't slept well in weeks. Every night, dreams of the ship filled his mind. Dreams of flying through space, hunting Dominion vessels. Sometimes he woke up certain he could feel the ship calling to him. "What about weapons?" Marcus asked. Lisa stepped up to the diagram. "We've installed 5 different weapon systems. None of them were meant to work together, but we've modified the power distribution. Based on our calculations, they'll cut through Dominion shields like they're not even there." A tall woman raised her hand. Anna Jones had been a test pilot before the invasion. Now she was one of 6 pilots trained to fly the Nightmare. "What about the neural load?" she asked. The simulation showed dangerous levels of brain activity after 30 minutes of connection. The room went quiet. Everyone knew the risk. The neural interface allowed the pilot to control the ship with their mind, to feel the ship as an extension of their body. But the human brain wasn't built for such a connection. "We're still working on that," Emma admitted. "For now, we recommend keeping connections under 20 minutes. Jack stepped forward. "That won't be enough in a real fight. The simulations show, Emma began. I don't care what the simulations show, Jack interrupted. I've connected with it. The ship needs more. It needs commitment. Emma's eyes narrowed. You've been connecting without authorization. That's dangerous, Jack. It's necessary, he replied. And I'll be the primary pilot when we launch. That's not. Emma started, but Jack cut her off again. It's decided. My mind is already linked to the ship. It knows me. The strange certainty in his voice silenced the room. No one, not even Emma, challenged him further. The next day, they prepared for the first full system test. Jack sat in the pilot's chair as Emma attached neural sensors to his temples and the back of his neck. This is a test only, she reminded him. Don't push for full integration. Just establish connection, run basic systems check, then disconnect. Understand? Jack nodded, but his eyes were already focused on something only he could see. Emma stepped back and gave the signal. Powering neural interface in 3, 2, 1. The connection hit Jack like a wave. In an instant, he wasn't just sitting in a chair. He was the nightmare. He could feel every part of the ship. The engines thrumming like a heartbeat, the weapon systems tingling like fingers ready to strike, the sensors stretching out like curious eyes. In the control room, Emma watched the monitors with growing concern. His neural activity is off the charts, she told Lisa. We should shut it down. Inside the ship, Jack opened his eyes, both his human eyes and the ship's sensors. He could see the cave around him, but also beyond it, through layers of rock, feeling the mountain's weight above him. Jack, can you hear me? Emma's voice came through the comms. Your readings are dangerously high. We're shutting down in 30 seconds. No, Jack replied, his voice oddly calm. I need to test the full capacity. Before Emma could respond, Jack activated the engine systems. The ship hummed to life, its makeshift supports groaning under the sudden power surge. Jack, stop, Emma shouted. The supports aren't designed for active engines. But Jack wasn't listening. He pushed deeper into the connection, feeling the ship respond to his thoughts. The nightmare trembled, eager to break free from its restraints. In a moment of clarity, Jack realized what he was doing and pulled back. The engines powered down, and the ship settled back into its supports. I'm sorry, he gasped, his mind struggling to separate from the ship. When the neural interface finally disconnected, Jack collapsed in the chair. Blood trickled from his nose, and his eyes were bloodshot. Emma helped him to the medical area, where he lay shivering despite the warm blankets around him. What happened in there? She asked once his vitals had stabilized. Jack stared at the ceiling. It was more than I expected. The ship, it's not just machinery, Emma. There's something else there. What do you mean? It's like it has feelings, desires. Jack turned to look at her. It wants to hunt. Emma frowned. That's the interface affecting your brain. We need to adjust the settings. Jack shook his head. No, it's not a malfunction. It's what makes the nightmare special. Later that night, the core team met to discuss what had happened. We should delay the launch, Emma argued. Jack's reaction to the interface is concerning. We don't have time, Marcus countered. Our sources say the Dominion is planning a new wave of security protocols. If we don't move soon, we'll lose our window. Tom looked troubled. Did anyone else notice the ship's hull after Jack's test? The metal changed color where his hands touched the controls. It's darker, almost like. Like what? Lisa asked. Like it absorbed something from him, Tom finished. The team fell silent, considering the implications. 3 days later, despite Emma's concerns, they prepared for the nightmare's first real flight. The massive hidden doors in the mountainside opened to reveal a cloudy night sky. Jack sat in the pilot's chair, the neural interface humming as it connected to his mind. This time, he was ready for the rush of sensation. Neural connection stable, Emma reported from the control room. All systems online. Jack, how do you feel? Jack smiled. We feel ready. Emma caught the strange wording, but had no time to question it as the Nightmare's engines fired up. The ship rose from its cradle, hovering in the cave for a moment before shooting out into the night. As the Nightmare soared into the clouds, Jack felt a sense of freedom he hadn't known since before the invasion. The ship responded to his thoughts faster than he could form them, almost anticipating his desires. High above Earth, hidden from Dominion sensors, the Nightmare performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. It twisted and turned with a grace that defied its patchwork construction. And deep in Jack's mind, a voice that wasn't entirely his own whispered, "Soon, we hunt." The alarm blared through the forge at 3:42 a.m., jolting everyone from sleep. Marcus burst into the main control room, his face pale. "Dominion ships," he announced to the gathering team. "A cruiser and 2 scout vessels just entered Earth orbit. They're heading for the Atlantic Processing Station." Emma pushed her way to the front. "Why? That station has been operational for months without inspection. They detected energy fluctuations during our test flight," Lisa explained, studying the data on her tablet. "They're sending an inspection team to investigate." Jack stood silently by the wall, his eyes distant. Since the test flight 3 days ago, he had been different, quieter, more focused, as if listening to a voice no one else could hear. "How long until they reach the station?" he asked. 2 hours, Marcus replied. "And they'll find evidence of our thefts. The missing components, the altered records, everything." The room erupted in panicked discussion. They had planned for their first strike carefully, targeting a small Dominion outpost near Neptune. They weren't ready for a direct confrontation above Earth. "We need to evacuate," someone said. "Scatter and regroup later." "No," Jack's voice cut through the noise. "We fight." Emma stared at him. "The Nightmare hasn't been fully tested. The weapons systems." "Will work," Jack finished. He looked around the room, his eyes strangely bright. "This is what we built it for. We either use it now or lose everything." No one argued. Deep down, they all knew he was right. 40 minutes later, Jack sat in the pilot's chair as the final preparations were made. Emma attached the neural interface connectors with practiced hands. 20 minutes, she reminded him. That's the safe limit for neural connection. Jack nodded, but they both knew the coming battle would take longer. "Be careful," Emma added quietly. "The ship responds to your emotions. If you lose control—" "I won't," Jack promised, though something in his voice made Emma step back. As the neural interface activated, Jack closed his eyes. The familiar rush of connection washed over him, but this time he didn't fight it. He let himself sink deeper into the bond with the ship, until the line between man and machine blurred. "We are ready," thought Jack, or perhaps it was the ship thinking through Jack. The mountain doors opened, and the Nightmare rose silently into the night sky. Its hull, designed to absorb rather than reflect, was invisible to both human eyes and Dominion sensors. High above Earth, the Dominion cruiser approached the orbital station. Twice the size of the largest human spacecraft ever built, it bristled with weapons and scanning equipment. The 2 scout ships flanked it, their sleek forms cutting through the blackness of space. Inside the Nightmare, Jack watched through the ship's sensors. He could see the energy signatures of the Dominion vessels, feel their movements as if they were creatures swimming in water. "Approaching target," he reported, his voice oddly calm. "Weapons hot." In the control room back at the forge, Emma and the others gathered around the communications array. They had no video feed. The Nightmare systems were incompatible with their equipment, but they could hear Jack's voice. "Be careful," Emma whispered, though Jack couldn't hear her. "Remember who you are." The Dominion cruiser had just docked with the orbital station when its sensors detected something unusual, a brief energy spike where nothing should be. Before the alien crew could react, the Nightmare appeared as if from nowhere, its weapons already firing. The first blast struck the cruiser's engine section, cutting through shields that had been designed to stop conventional attacks. This was no conventional weapon. It was a hybrid of technologies never meant to work together, powered by a human mind that understood rage in ways the Dominion never could. The scout ships broke formation, turning to face the threat. They fired energy beams that should have vaporized the smaller vessel, but the Nightmare moved with impossible speed, twisting between the attacks as if it could predict them. Inside, Jack laughed. He could feel the Dominion ships, sensed their confusion, their fear. The neural interface showed him not just their positions but their weaknesses. Each Dominion vessel became a puzzle of vulnerable points, connecting in his mind like a deadly constellation. The Nightmare fired again, its weapons changing frequency to match the scout ship's shields. One vessel exploded in a silent flash of light. The other attempted to flee, but the Nightmare pursued, moving like a predator after wounded prey. "Jack, report status." Emma's voice came through the comms, tense with worry. Jack didn't answer immediately. He was too focused on the hunt, the ship's consciousness merging with his own until they moved as one being. The second scout ship died under his weapons, breaking apart into spinning debris. Only the cruiser remained, its massive bulk trying to disengage from the station. Jack felt a surge of cold rage. These were the creatures who had conquered Earth, who had killed Emma's family, who had reduced humanity to servants. The Nightmare responded to his emotions, its weapons charging to full power. "Jack," Emma's voice cut through his thoughts. "Your neural readings are dangerously high. You need to disconnect." But Jack wouldn't stop. The Nightmare surged forward, firing all weapons simultaneously. The cruiser's shields failed under the assault, and huge sections of its hull tore away into space. Jack guided the Nightmare in close, feeling a savage joy as the ship tore into the cruiser like claws ripping flesh. Warning signals flashed across the neural interface, but he ignored them, pushing deeper into the connection. The Dominion ship broke apart, its reactor core destabilizing. Jack watched through the Nightmare's sensors as alien crew members were sucked into space, their bodies freezing instantly in the vacuum. "I see you," he whispered to the dying aliens. "I see all of you now." As the cruiser's remains drifted away from the station, Jack finally pulled back from the deep connection. Blood ran from his nose and ears, but he was smiling. "Target eliminated," he reported, his voice hoarse. "The station is safe." Back at the forge, the control room erupted in cheers. Humanity had won its first victory against the Dominion. But Emma wasn't celebrating. She stared at the neural readings from Jack's interface, her face grim. "Something's wrong," she told Lisa quietly. "These patterns, they're not entirely human anymore." When the Nightmare returned to base 3 hours later, the team rushed to meet their hero. But when Jack emerged from the ship, they fell silent. His eyes had changed. They were darker, with strange flecks of silver that seemed to move when he blinked. More disturbing was the ship itself. The hull, once a patchwork of different metals, had somehow changed. The sections had merged together more completely, and strange patterns had formed on the surface, patterns that looked disturbingly like neural pathways in a human brain. As Jack walked past his cheering teammates, only Emma noticed how his movements had changed, becoming more fluid, more predatory. And only Emma saw how, when Jack thought no one was looking, he reached back to touch the Nightmare's hull with an expression that looked almost like longing. In the 3 weeks since the destruction of the Dominion cruiser, everything had changed. The once secret forge had become a buzzing center of activity. Word had spread through hidden human networks about the ship that had taken down a Dominion cruiser. Volunteers poured in, engineers, pilots, soldiers, all eager to join the fight. But no one was allowed near the Nightmare itself. It sat in a separate chamber, guarded not by humans, but by automated systems Jack had designed. No one questioned this arrangement. No one except Emma. She stood in her lab, studying the latest scans of Jack's brain. The patterns were unlike anything she had seen before, neural pathways rewiring themselves, new connections forming where none should exist. "How bad is it?" Lisa asked, joining her at the display. Emma sighed. "I don't know. His brain activity is off the charts, but he's functioning better than ever. His reaction time, memory, problem solving, all enhanced." "Then maybe it's not a problem," Lisa suggested. "Maybe it's evolution." "It's not evolution when it happens overnight," Emma replied sharply. "And it's not just Jack. The ship is changing too." Before Lisa could respond, alarms blared throughout the base. They rushed to the main control room, where Marcus was directing operations. "Dominion fleet incoming," he announced. 12 ships, including a dreadnought. "They're heading straight for us." "How did they find us?" Tom demanded. "They didn't," Marcus replied. "They're conducting a sweep of the entire region. But they'll detect us soon enough." All eyes turned to Jack, who stood silently in the corner. In the weeks since the battle, he had spoken less and less, spending most of his time with the nightmare. "Jack." Emma stepped toward him. "We need to evacuate." Jack shook his head, his silver-flecked eyes reflecting the red emergency lights. "No. They're hunting us now. If we run, they'll never stop." "We can't fight a dreadnought," Tom argued. "That thing carries enough firepower to glass half a continent." A cold smile crossed Jack's face. "The nightmare can fight it. We're stronger now." Emma noticed how he said "we" instead of "it" when referring to the ship. She tried one more time. "Jack, your neural readings are dangerously unstable. Another deep connection could permanently damage your brain." "Or complete the process," Jack replied cryptically. Before anyone could stop him, he turned and walked toward the nightmare's chamber. The doors opened at his approach, then sealed behind him. In the control room, screens lit up as the nightmare systems came online. "He's launching," Marcus reported, his voice tight with tension. Emma rushed to the neural monitoring station. "Jack, please, at least let us monitor your vitals during the fight." There was a long pause before Jack's voice came through the speakers. It sounded different, deeper, with a strange harmonic quality. "Very well, Emma. For you." The mountain doors opened, and the nightmare rose into the night sky. Emma gasped when she saw it on the external cameras. The ship had changed dramatically. Its hull was now a seamless black surface that seemed to bend light around it. The weapons systems had integrated more completely into the structure, like natural extensions rather than added components. "My God," Tom whispered, "what is it becoming?" High above Earth, the Dominion fleet moved in a standard search pattern. The dreadnought, a massive vessel the size of a small city, formed the center of their formation. Smaller ships circled it, their sensors scanning the planet below. Inside the nightmare, Jack connected to the neural interface. This time, there was no resistance, no sense of separation between himself and the ship. They flowed together like water mixing with water. The nightmare approached the fleet from below, visible only as a slight distortion against the stars. Its new hull didn't just absorb energy, it bent it, creating a camouflage effect that made the ship nearly invisible. In the lead scout ship, a Dominion sensor operator noticed something unusual, a momentary shadow that shouldn't exist. Before he could report it, the nightmare struck. Unlike the previous battle, there was no hesitation, no learning curve. The nightmare tore through the first scout ship before its crew could even raise shields. The second and third followed in rapid succession, their debris creating a cloud that confused the remaining ship's sensors. In the Forge's control room, Emma and the team watched in stunned silence. The neural readings from Jack showed activity in parts of the brain that should have been impossible. "He's not fighting like a human," Marcus observed. "Those maneuvers, that precision, it's like watching a machine." "Or something else entirely," Emma whispered. The Dominion fleet broke formation, trying to surround the attacker that they could barely detect. The dreadnought launched fighters, filling space with small, agile craft. The Nightmare moved among them like a shark through schools of fish, destroying fighters with short, precise energy bursts. Each kill made the ship stronger, as if it were absorbing energy from its victims. Finally, only the dreadnought remained. It fired its main cannon, a beam of concentrated energy that could split a planet's crust. The Nightmare didn't dodge. It met the beam head-on. For a moment, Emma thought the ship had been destroyed. Then the sensors showed something impossible. The Nightmare had absorbed the energy blast and was using it to power its own weapons. The dreadnought never had a chance. The Nightmare tore it apart piece by piece, methodically destroying weapons, engines, and finally life support. As the massive ship died, Jack broadcast a message on all Dominion frequencies. "You thought us primitive. You gave us your scraps and expected gratitude. Now you face what we built from your trash. We are the Nightmare you created." The message repeated in every Dominion language, ensuring they all understood. Back at the forge, the control room was silent as the Nightmare returned. Everyone had seen what it could do, what Jack could do. The line between hero and monster had never seemed so thin. When the ship landed, Emma was the first to approach. The chamber doors opened, and Jack emerged. He was changed. His skin was pale, with dark veins visible beneath. His eyes were now completely silver, reflecting light like mirrors. When he moved, it was with an inhuman grace. "Jack." Emma's voice shook slightly. "Are you still in there?" Jack tilted his head, studying her as if from a great distance. Then his expression softened. "Yes, Emma. Part of me is still Jack Reed." He looked back at the Nightmare, its hull seeming to pulse in sync with his heartbeat. "But I am more now. We are more." "What happens next?" she asked. Jack smiled, and for a moment, Emma could see the man she had known. Then the alien coldness returned to his eyes. "The Dominion has many worlds, Emma. Many ships, many resources." He turned to look at the assembled humans. "They will come in greater numbers now, afraid of what they don't understand, afraid of what they created." He placed a hand on the Nightmare's hull, and the metal seemed to flow slightly toward his touch. "We will be waiting, and we will show them what humanity can build from trash." As Jack spoke, Emma noticed something on the ship's hull, patterns forming and dissolving like thoughts made visible. And for the first time, she understood that the Nightmare wasn't just a ship anymore. It was something new, born from human ingenuity and alien technology, fueled by human rage and alien power. Neither fully machine nor fully alive, but a Nightmare given form, and it was only the beginning.